What is going on, guys? I'm going to be giving you a list of my top 20 fantasy football running backs so far this year. I know it's early, but it's never too early to do some research and get you guys some information. Go ahead and hit that sub button if you are new, and if you're coming from TikTok, welcome over. But you know me, I don't like to waste anybody's time, so the very first running back, number one, pretty much a consensus running back here, is Christian McCaffrey. Not too much to discuss here. He's going to be a locked-in fantasy producer, one of those solid, safe guys, outside of injury, of course, but you can't really predict that. He has the receiving upside that we want as well. He's my number one fantasy running back as of right now going into the year. But my number two running back for the year is going to be Austin Ekeler. He has led the league in touchdowns over the past 2 years. I do think his targets will decrease a little bit with Mike Evans and Keenan Allen being healthy this year. Last year, they both missed a little bit of time, and it caused Austin Ekeler to be the only source of offense for Justin Herbert, really. So, assuming everyone can stay healthy, it's just a given that Austin Ekeler will see a little bit less targets, but that's not to say he's not going to be good at fantasy football. Now, my number three running back for this year is Bijan Robinson, and I've been considering moving him down from about 3 to 5. Anywhere in that range is kind of interchangeable to me, but let me tell you why. To start out, he's probably going to lead the NFL in touches this year. Arthur Smith loves to run the ball. We saw this in his time with Derrick Henry on the Titans, as well as the 3 running back committee that he started in Atlanta this year. But now they got their guy. They also have a pretty decent offensive line to hold up with his volume, as well as his receiving upside, so there's a couple things to look forward to here. At number 4 on my ranking for this year, I have Jonathan Taylor. I would have put him a little bit higher, but this offense probably won't move that well, maybe a bit better than last season. But historically, another thing you have to add is running backs that play with running quarterbacks don't get as many checkdowns, and they kind of average a little bit lower in fantasy points. Just something to keep in mind. But with that being said, JT has never really been an extreme pass catcher, so that might not affect him too much. Honestly, I like him here, number 4. At number 5, I have Saquon Barkley sitting at an ADP of 16.7, assuming that he can play the entire season with the Giants. I like him at this round 2 turn. The Giants don't have an extremely talented wide receiver core, so expect Daniel Jones to keep dumping the ball off to him and leaning on him a little bit for this offense. But they also did bring in Darren Waller, which might not be a bad thing. Darren Waller might be able to space the field out a little bit more and give Saquon Barkley more room to work. So I love being able to get Saquon at this ADP. Another guy I'm really looking forward to this year is Nick Chubb at an ADP of 18.3. That is just great value. He is the definition of an ultra consistent running back. He's averaged 100 total yards on the season for the past 3 seasons, I think. And now there's no Kareem Hunt. And you could make the case that Deshaun Watson can't be worse. He was already pretty bad last season, and Nick Chubb was able to work with him then. Even with lackluster play from Watson, he was still a decent fantasy option. You could again make the case that he's playing alongside a running quarterback, but he shouldn't be too affected by that. I want to know what you guys think. Number 6 is a great spot for him for me. At number 7, I have Derrick Henry at an ADP of 25, and I've seen a lot of people going back and forth on Derrick Henry this year. Some people think this is way too high, but some people think this is way too low, and let me get into that. I will start by saying there are some red flags for him this year. He is getting older. He's almost 30 years old, which in running back terms is getting up there. He's also playing with the worst offense in his career by far, and playing with Ryan Tannehill is probably going to be his best bet in fantasy football, but I doubt that's going to happen for the entirety of the season. He's never really been a receiving running back, and he relies on touches and touchdowns, which might be down a little bit this year too. Like I said before, historically, running backs that play alongside running quarterbacks don't get dump-offs as often, and if you're presuming Malik Willis or even Will Levis to play a majority of the season, that could affect him. Now, obviously, if this is non-PPR, he's going to be a lot higher, but all of these rankings in this video are for PPR leagues because that's the standard for most leagues. But at number 8, I have Josh Jacobs at 27.2 ADP, but I do have a little bit of worry for Josh Jacobs only because I don't trust Jimmy G as much as I do Derek Carr. But I think it's obvious that this offense is going to take a little bit of a step down, and now there's questions about Jimmy G's health. I do really like Josh Jacobs as a prospect, but there's a lot of uncertainty here this early in the season, so I'm gonna keep him at number 8. At number 9, I have Tony Pollard, which his ADP is at 21.9, a little bit higher than these other guys, but I have him at 9. Because again, there's still uncertainty. Yes, Zeke has left the team, but the Cowboys, I mean, they could always bring him back, but they could also sign another running back in the offseason. We've heard time and time again that the Cowboys organization doesn't really want Tony Pollard to be a bell cow running back. We saw that last year with Zeke. Even when Zeke wasn't playing, they still put a cap on his carries and his snap shares. But if they don't go out and get any other running backs, I could probably put him higher. He's a great value. But at number 10, I have Breece Hall, and some people might be slowing me down and talking about his ACL injury. But let me tell you, this might actually be a blessing in disguise. He looked way too good last season, and I'm sure if he stopped his season and didn't get injured when he did, he would be at least in the top 5 for running backs this year. So he might be hiding behind that ACL injury. But honestly, if he falls to me, I'm willing to take him at the 30 ADP that he's at. But at number 11, I have Rhamandre Stevenson, another guy that I've been drafting a lot so far this year because he turned into a mini Austin Ekeler at the end of that last season. He got an insane amount of receiving work and at times was the wide receiver 1 on this offense. And with that being said, there still aren't that many prime wide receiver options on this team, and you could argue that there's even less than there was last year. And Dameon Harris is not on the team anymore. He has practically no competition to beat out in the backfield. And now you could make the case that they could go out and sign another running back or even a guy like DeAndre Hopkins to take some targets away from him. But knowing the Patriots, they probably won't do that. And at this time, I'm loving his ADP. At my number 12 spot, I have Travis Etienne. From week 7 through the end of the year, he was averaging about 14 or 15 fantasy points a game, looking like he had a lot of potential for this season. He was tied at 5th in carries at the 10-yard line, so they trust him at the goal line, which is really good news for this year. And he has a lot of receiving value. He averaged a 22% target rate per route, and they pretty much have given him the receiving role. And if we're playing PPR, this is exactly what we need to look for. And the only people he has to beat out for the backfield is Dearness Johnson, Jermichael Hasty, and Tank Bigsby. Number 13, I have Najee Harris at an ADP of 38.2, and a lot of people have already written him off this year. He had a really slow start to the season. He didn't see a game over 20 carries for the first 8 weeks of the season, but after that bye week, he saw 5 or more games over 20 carries a game, and they started to get his work back on track. There is a little bit of uncertainty, obviously, but this Kenny Pickett offense is only going to improve. And if you are worried about him, you can draft Jaylen Warren late in rounds 2 and just have that dual threat. At number 14, I'm loving Joe Mixon at his 54.3 ADP. There's a lot of uncertainty here, but there's also a lot of bust and boom potential. And this makes him a little bit hard to rank, but a lot of people are avoiding him because of this. But if we consider running backs on a top 5 offense in the NFL just already have an increased average number of fantasy points, I honestly would consider him here. Last year, he dominated the passing game, and now there's no Samaje Perine anymore. If all goes well, he could be an absolute league winner at this ADP. At 15, I have Aaron Jones, and the only reason I don't have him a bit higher is because I really don't trust Jordan Love. So that's automatically putting him down just a little bit in my rankings. But also, AJ Dillon looked great last season. If we continue to see a 50-50 or even less of a 50-50 split for Aaron Jones, his potential ceiling obviously is going to be capped. But at number 16, I have Kenneth Walker, and he just keeps dropping in my rankings. Unfortunately, we do have to be realistic. He's not going to repeat what he did last year. Now, that's not because of a lack of talent, but the situation is just not the same. The Seahawks are going to look to pass even more than they did last year, acquiring JSN from the draft, and their offense is just way too overpowered. Not to mention they drafted running back Zach Charbonnet in the 2nd round, and he is a beast. He has a lot of receiving upside as well. It could take some volume away from the receptions, obviously, as well as the carries. He's going to take a majority of that receiving work, which we need for PPR, and it'll probably be a 60-40 split in my opinion. And at number 17, I have Jahmyr Gibbs. He has an elite offense to work with the Lions. They did draft him extremely early, which means they do have trust in him, but at the same time, they picked up David Montgomery. Now, we're not completely sure who's going to get the most volume out of this backfield, but I can assume that David Montgomery is going to get the majority of the goal line work, at least in the first couple weeks. I really like Gibbs as a prospect, but these are 2 extremely talented running backs. And because of that, neither of them are going to get phased out for the other. To me, this really looks like a Zeke and Pollard situation. I think Gibbs will probably take more of the receiving work, but David Montgomery is going to be that 3-down guy, and he's going to take the goal line work at least a little bit for the first half of the season. Now, I'm not saying you should completely avoid Gibbs because of this. If anything, you can trade for him at a discount in the beginning of the season, but I do think he has some upside here. And at number 18, I have Alexander Mattison. At the point of my recording, he's being drafted at an ADP of 76.8, I think. Now, we do have to point out that he's been a top 3 fantasy point performer in games that Dalvin Cook has missed in the past 4 seasons. So there's a lot of data here backing up that he could be pretty good, but we do have to slow our roll a little bit. To the blind eye, it does look like he's going to be the workhorse that is going to take all of Dalvin Cook's work. I think that's a little bit too good to be true, though. I really wouldn't be surprised if another running back was brought on for touches, but again, it's too early to know, so this is where I rank him as of right now. But at number 19, I have James Conner, and a lot of people are disgusted by him because of his offense, but he was a top 4 running back in the last 8 weeks of the season, even without Kyler Murray. We know that most of the time we want to avoid running backs that are on a bottom 5 offense, but this might be an exception. Obviously, they don't have D-Hop anymore, and they're just gonna need to rely on the run game. And as of right now, he has quite literally 0 competition in the backfield. There's also the possibility that they run him into the ground to get his value up, because he has a potential out at the end of the season. So honestly, at an ADP of 90 almost, I really do like this pick. But number 20 on my list is going to be J.K. Dobbins. He's at the same ADP as he was last year, but now he's fully healthy and he hasn't moved. There are speculations that the Ravens' new OC is going to run a more pass-heavy offense, which might be true, especially with Odell Beckham. But I've never really been too fond of running backs alongside Lamar Jackson just because of all of the running he takes himself. But I do think Dobbins absolutely has the talent to do it. If he gets the opportunity, I really do like his potential. At number 21, I have Miles Sanders, a controversial take, but I do kind of like him this year, especially at this ADP. Hopefully the Panthers can have a decent offense this year. Bryce Young doesn't have an insane amount of wide receiver help, so maybe Miles Sanders gets a little bit more work in the receiving game than we've seen previously. And the only competition he has to beat out in the backfield is Chuba Hubbard now that Donta Foreman is gone. And at round 6, I'm okay with taking this chance. And to add on to that, he never played above a 70% snap share on the Eagles last year, and now he's presumably the lead back. And at the number 2 spot, I have Dameon Pierce. He has been falling down draft boards like crazy. Historically, again, you really don't want to be looking for running backs on a bottom 5 offense, but his ADP has just been absolutely plummeting, and it's really up in the air right now. On ESPN, he's averaging a draft position in the 4th round, but I've seen him in my drafts go as low as 7 or 8. And they just went out to go sign Devin Singletary to split this backfield, and we know he likes to catch the ball. He's also alongside a quarterback that does like to run a little bit, so this is really a 50-50 position for me. And at number 3, I had to put Dalvin Cook. He has an ADP of around 76, I believe, and it's really just hard to rank him right now. Nobody knows where this dude is landing, and I assume it's going to be a contending team, which will put him up in my rankings a bit, but as of right now, we really don't know. We know he's a great running back, but it really depends on the running back situation he goes to. At a number 24, I have DeAndre Swift. I have him this low because he really just relies on his receiving work, and he's playing alongside Jalen Hurts on the Eagles. The Eagles last year were 31st in checkdown rates, so it's already not looking good for his volume, not to mention the absolute star-studded roster they have, and there's so many mouths to feed. But with that being said, he's on a good team, and running backs on good teams usually put up more points than average. So that being said, he'll probably have a lot more looks on the field than he's previously seen, and maybe more goal line work. Number 25, I wanted to put in Rachaad White at an ADP of 85.4, and I do kind of think he's a sneaky sleeper here. I wanted to put him in at 25. Leonard Fournette is not on the team anymore, and that's who he was competing with for touches last year. And we saw his receiving upside last year. He had 50 receptions in his rookie year, and that's easily his floor this year. And yes, drafting running backs on a bad team can be a little bit risky, but getting a receiving RB1 this low in the draft is just unheard of. But that concludes my top 25 fantasy football running back rankings this early in the season. If you've made it through this far, you're an absolute GOAT, and I appreciate you, and I'll see you guys in the next video.